quarantining plants is something that I discovered is something that you should do. I discovered the hard way. So last summer I bought some umbrella plants like the Schrophilla arbicola for my carpet python.
Yep.
And then I started noticing the growing tips kept dying. I'm like, what the hell? Like they start, they'd come up, you start to see the leaves show up and then they turn black and die. And the leaves were producing a lot of sap as well. And then I took a closer look and I realized it had those little brown scaly bugs. They don't even look like bugs. They're just like little bumps on the leaves. So I was like, oh my gosh. So I treated the plant. I took the animal out. I kind of did like a isopropyl and some hydrogen peroxide, like trying to kill it.
Mhm.
And it actually worked well. The plant, it killed them off and the plants came back and started throwing out shoots again. But then in a few weeks later, they were popping back up. The shoot tips started dying again. And it was like an everyday thing where I was like going in there with a Q-tip trying to pull them off. And it was a nightmare. And then I eventually just got fed up and just basically pruned them down to just the stalks. And I thought they were going to die, but they did actually come back. And I haven't seen any, like the leaves have come back and there's no sign of pests now. So thankfully, but that was a really annoying experience. So I do have a quarantine set up on the other side of my room now where I have some new plants that I'll add in there. So anyway, that's a long story of telling everybody that quarantining is something you should do. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that because there are some annoying pests that you can bring in.
Yeah, there's a lot of annoying bugs. So I find that, or at least I try to, with all of my new plants that I bring in, I try and do a quarantine of at least a month before using them in an actual setup. And so what I'll actually do is, like, a very good practice is to get rid of all of your soil that comes in with the plant, repot it, wash off all of its roots, because a lot of these bugs will actually lay their eggs and they'll just drop into the dirt. So you think you've killed them off after spraying them with whatever. And then like 3 weeks later, you've got the same problem. And you're like, I thought I just dealt with that. So that's like definitely one of the best things you can do is repot it and then let it sit for about a month outside of any other plants you have that are clean. Another thing that you can also do is like just washing it off. And if you're comfortable, I would recommend doing like a 10% bleach dip on your plant. And no, that will actually just kill off any of the bugs that are on there because they can't handle it. That's actually a practice that we do at the nursery with like reusing our pots. We'll soak them for about an hour. Don't soak your plant for an hour. It wouldn't do very good, but doing a light bleach dip on the plant for maybe like a minute or two should kill off any bugs that are living on it.
So is that the leaves and the roots?
Now, I wouldn't do the roots just because they're more sensitive to soaking things up, but basically up to your root line, I would just get like a 5-gallon bucket, mix up water and some bleach, and then give it a dip, and it usually works very well.
Are there any other because the other thing I did, so once I started this quarantine thing, I have like a Tupperware container or like a big Rubbermaid tub, and I have my new plants in there. And I was looking online and I found like homemade DIY insecticidal soap. You just like do like the Dawn and some oil. I think I used castor oil and water, and I sprayed it on there. I'm like, this is great. And then like the leaves just burnt up. Like so many leaves died, and they're starting to recover now. And I didn't even see pests on them. I was like, oh, this would be like a prophylactic treatment for anything. And especially my palms, they've just like leaves gone brown and black. So I clearly went a little heavy on the insecticide. So that's not recommended. But is there any other soaps and things like that that are good to bring in when you're doing a quarantine?
Yeah, so basically with oils and stuff like that, they work, but it has to be very, very like calculated the amount that you use, just because when you add an oil to it, it's going to cut off all the oxygen that is being exchanged in the plant leaf. So you're basically suffocating it, but you're also like, it suffocates the bug too. So that's what you're trying to get, because then the bug can't breathe and then they die. But usually if you do like dish soap and water, that's going to do most of your super easy insects to kill. So like your aphids and possibly thrips. But I find that there's 2 commercially available products. So like you got your Safer company, and then they make a product called Safer Soap, which is basically pre-formulated. It's the right amount of soap mixed with water, and it's like their own sort of blend. And then you also have another product called Endol. And now this actually has a product in there called pyrethrin, and that basically acts as a neural inhibitor for the bug. So it basically puts them into a spasm and then they die.
Mm.
And they are both relatively safe as long as you just wash your plant after doing this before you introduce it with your animals.
Is there any product that you could use in a situation where their plants are already in the vivarium? Like, could you, I guess theoretically the Dawn and water shouldn't be toxic for the animal, because Dawn is not, I mean, you don't want to use a ton, but if you use a light spray, would that be okay, do you think? I mean, I'm not asking for a vet opinion here, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah. So I would like, as long as the animal's taken out of the enclosure, I think that the Dawn sort of method would work. I've also heard a lot of people in the dark frog community, they will actually, let's say you get like a thrips infestation in your tank, and it's like you have almost $1,000 worth of plants in there that you don't want to rip out and kill. So what they'll actually do is a CO2 bomb,
Mm-hmm.
where they'll basically funnel in either using like CO2 canister, or they'll get dry ice, and they basically close up everything except for a tube that goes into the tank. And then they'll have the CO2 pumping in there for however long, maybe a day or two, until it runs out. And then basically the plants will take in the CO2 and then turn that into oxygen, but the bugs will suffocate because they have no oxygen to breathe at the current time.
And obviously the frogs are pulled out before they do that.
Yeah, they do the frogs out. That wouldn't be good.
I think I have those thrips things on a hibiscus, because it seems like those things come in on hibiscus plants all the time, and they're like those little. Yeah. I don't know if those are thrips. They're like these little tiny black kind of. They're like long shaped little bugs.
Yeah, that's most likely thrips. You'll get like the two most common are Western flower thrip, which are yellow, and they really like pollen, so they'll hang around flowers. And then you get your greenhouse thrip, which are the black ones that are very, just because of how the greenhouse industry has been the last 20 years, a lot of the greenhouse thrips have actually developed immunity to a lot of the commercial pesticides, which makes them really hard to kill, which is unfortunate for people that are just bringing it in and don't have access to harsh chemicals.
Yeah, it's and I guess in the end of the day, something like I'm not really bothered by them as much. They're in my day gecko enclosure. They're not affecting her. They're not actually really damaging the plant. The plant still grows and blooms and everything. So I do wish I didn't have them, but at the end of the day, it's not like a snake mites situation where it's like going to harm the animal. But it definitely, quarantining plants is for sure something that should be practiced across the board.
Yeah, like if you have plants in your house, even if you just have house plants, it's a very good practice to get into.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way. So as far as your personal collection goes, let's talk about that a little bit, because you said you have some interesting projects on the go. So I know one for sure is the Central American biotope. So maybe we'll